नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है शुभम और आपका स्वागत है हिस्ट्री ऑफ थिंग्स में। हिस्ट्री ऑफ थिंग्स में आज हम लोग जिस विषय पर बात करने जा रहे हैं वो है कास्ट। जी हाँ दोस्तों, कास्ट के विषय में बहुत सारी भ्रांतियां इस देश के अंदर फैली हुई हैं। कास्ट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन को लेकर भारत को कई लोग कोसते रहते हैं। दुनिया भर में इसके ऊपर काफी सारा लिटरेचर लोगों ने तैयार किया है और एंटी इंडिया पॉलिटिक्स करने वाले ब्रेकिंग इंडिया फोर्सेस के लोग बहुत ज्यादा कास्ट पर अटैक करते हैं। लेकिन असल में दोस्तों, ये जो कास्ट है ये ब्रिटिश का ही कंस्ट्रक्ट है। ब्रिटिशर्स ने ही इसको क्रिएट किया और किस तरह से उन्होंने भारत के अंदर इसके बेस पर डिवाइड किया। ना सिर्फ नॉर्थ इंडिया के अंदर, साउथ इंडिया के अंदर भी दोस्तों द्रविड़ पॉलिटिक्स की शुरुआत वहां पर की गई और उसमें एक एंटी ब्राह्मण मूवमेंट चलाकर किस तरह से पूरा एक कास्ट का नैरेटिव, द्रविड़ का नैरेटिव वहां पर गढ़ा गया, इस विषय में हम आज के इस वीडियो में जानने वाले हैं। तो दोस्तों, जो शख्स मेरे साथ इस वीडियो के अंदर आज आपसे बात करेंगे वो किसी भी परिचय के मोहताज नहीं है। वो आईआईएम कलकत्ता से उन्होंने पीएचडी की है। आईआईएम बेंगलोर में कई वर्षों तक वो प्रोफेसर रहे हैं। भारत सरकार के बड़े बड़े संस्थानों जैसे कि आरबीआई है, सेबी है, उनके अंदर एडवाइजर का रोल उन्होंने प्ले किया है। इसके अलावा दोस्तों, विवेकानंद इंटरनेशनल फाउंडेशन के भी वो एडवाइजरी बोर्ड में हैं और एनएसए के भी एडवाइजरी बोर्ड में हैं। इसके अलावा दोस्तों, बहुत सारी भारत सरकार की नीतियों में बनाने में उनके इनपुट्स लगे हैं। तो दोस्तों, ऐसे व्यक्ति से आज हम लोग जानेंगे ये कास्ट के विषय में। तो दोस्तों, उनका नाम है आर वैद्यनाथन जी। आर वैद्यनाथन जी का मैं बहुत बहुत स्वागत करता हूं और धन्यवाद करता हूं कि उन्होंने आज हमें अपना कीमती समय दिया इस विषय पर बात करने के लिए। तो इस विषय पर जानने के लिए मैं सबसे पहले अपना एक प्रश्न रख देता हूं, उसके बाद हम उनको सुनेंगे। जो प्रश्न है वो यही है कि ये कास्ट शब्द की शुरुआत कहाँ से हुई, कैसे ब्रिटिशर्स ने ये सारा का सारा कंस्ट्रक्ट जो है वो गढ़ा, इसके अलावा कैसे ये सारी की सारी द्रविड़ पॉलिटिक्स दक्षिण भारत के अंदर आई और इस सारी चीजों का भविष्य में हल क्या है। तो ये मेरे प्रश्न हैं। आपका स्वागत है आर वैद्यनाथन जी। नमस्ते आर वैद्यनाथन सर, वेलकम टू हिस्ट्री ऑफ थिंग्स and thank you so much for giving us your precious time.
Thanks a lot. I really thank and all the audience and my namaskar. And at the outset, I'm very sorry, I'm not able to, I'm not very good at Hindi. Otherwise, I would have talked to you in Hindi. But I'm sure, you would excuse me for that.
No, sir, thank you so much.
Okay. Now, let's spend the next nearly 30 minutes on the issue which Shubham was kind enough to introduce, the question of caste. That has become a very major thing. Particularly now, there is also a demand for caste census. And I think many of you would have read in the paper and or television that Bihar Chief Minister, along with all the parties, every political party in Bihar, they went along with him, from Naxalite on one end to the BJP on the other extreme. All of them were in the delegation to demand for the caste census. So that has become a very, and that is, I would rather loosely call it as a, in terms of vote bank type of a politics also it has become. Now, caste is not something very new or anything to us, and it's a way of question of looking at it. And first and foremost is caste has always been there. There is no denial of that. There is no point in telling there was no caste or anything. It was always there. And one important thing to remember in Indian civilization, we never had slavery. Very, very important to remember. Islam had slavery, Christianity had slavery. We never believed in slavery actually as a method of owning up people and other things. So that's one of the major plus point for us. I'm talking about old history. If you look at Mahabharata, Ramayana, or any other later editions also, you will never have any mention of slaves being treated and traded. And so there is a lot of misconception. Many people equate caste system with slavery, and that's all not correct actually. And caste actually was always there. And this word caste itself is given to us by the Portuguese, actually, the conquista, they call it in terms of when they had their wars in Latin America and other things. So the Southern American countries, they had this concept of conquering them, and then conquista, and then caste came out of that. And we always used to have originally jati. That was the word which used to be used, and much before that, Varna. Varna is just a fourfold classification in terms of the warriors and the fellows, Brahmins and those who do business, Vaishyas, and this type of a thing. But Jati is the only common thing which is popular. Jati was always there, but most important is the Jati hierarchy was created in 1881 by the British. This, I think, is very, very important. Underline it. The first census of India was conducted in 1881. Before that, we didn't have any census in the modern sense of the term, counting each individual and asking their. So this was started by the British. And that time, they introduced the idea of hierarchy. Hierarchy means ABCD. That is, the Brahmins are sort of top, and next comes Kshatriyas. Then, why did they do it in 1890? There was a discussion, and they were telling. And in UK, we have fourfold classification: senior civil servants, officers, and clerks and peons. So same fourfold, we wanted to have it in India. Very simple. You see, any colonial power would like to understand the colonies from their point of view, mirror image of themselves, not in terms of our point of view or anything. For the simple reason, for a long period in 16th, 17th century even, most of the Indian men were using their mother's name as a, like we know Sri Ram as Kaushalya Putra, and these Pandavas were known as Kunti Putras, very, very rarely anything else actually. And we have Janaki Ram and Maithili Ram and various other type of. First is wife's name, then comes the man's name. But the man's name is Janaki Ram. So, but again, British altered this. That's a separate story. We will deal with that in some other context. Point I want to stress is 1881 was the first census undertaken by British, which created this caste hierarchy. Hierarchy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Till then, castes were there, but they were all very fluid actually. There is nothing called a fixed type of thing. A lot of sociologists like M.N. Srinivas, then and various other Gupta in Delhi, various others have clearly mentioned caste is a sort of it's not something frozen. Many a group belonging to what you may loosely call the business caste has moved to Brahmin caste and vice versa. And over a long period of time, significant changes have taken place. And of course, this oppressed and other thing they say, if caste were really oppressed, any caste were oppressed, we should have had a rebellion. For thousands of years, nobody would be oppressed actually. There would have been war. I have asked my Marxist friends, people who are Marxist historians, about any caste wars in India throughout the period, 12th century, 13th century. They could not tell me. In Europe, there were wars for every, 40, 50 years actually, among various tribes and various groups. And India, we don't have any example of a caste war. You can't say that this caste fought with that caste. And kingdoms were there. They had their war. It's a war primarily for the geographical thing. It's not anyhow. So that is the most important thing. This 1,000-year oppression and other thing is all political, sort of a slogan which came much later. And during the British time, this whole idea of this, what one can call the untouchability and other thing came. There are a lot of studies to establish that system of removing human excretia from the home started during the Mughal times, not prior to that. Prior to that, all people were using the open lands and other thing. During Mughal time, because of the burqa system, they were not allowing their women they didn't want them to go out. So they were kept inside only, and all the things were done inside. And to remove that, the bangis were started to be. So anyhow, that is a huge number of literature is there available on that. Now the point is, 1881, when they started the enumeration, they found very few. Hardly there were some 3,000 or then large number of people were very small number of caste. Many castes had only something like 10 people. That's all. That's it. There were castes which had only one person. Everybody used to proclaim themselves to belonging to a particular caste. So the British were not happy. They told, "What is this? We want to, create the proper system." So what they did, you will never imagine. In 1891 census, they told the enumerators, "You decide who belong to what caste." Never in the history of census anywhere in the world this has happened. They don't decide. You are asked and you tell them what is that. But they were asked to do that. That means, if a man is having a tuft, if a man is, having certain characteristics, then he is a Brahmin. If a man is having a big mush and he is having some weapons and other things, he is a Kshatriya. These are all, created by the British. It created havoc actually. And so that is how the hierarchy was created. Till 1931, caste census was there. 1931. 1941, during the Second World War, there was no census at all, proper census. And 1951 onwards, caste census was abolished. Jawaharlal Nehru felt we have become a casteless society. So remove that column. And so caste was not asked after 1951. You should know one interesting thing. The Mandal Commission of 1980, which came into being because of the demand by various Janata, what one can call Janata children, because a lot of Janata parties are there, and all of them are all originally rooted to the Socialist Party. Ramana or Logia, you may loosely call as their Adi, Devam, the original god. Out of that, all the Socialist Party, Praja Socialist, Samyukta Socialist, Janata Dal came, and Janata Dal also split into Samajwadi Party and this secular Janata and all that. Anyhow, all of them demanded. And one of the major leaders in Bihar was Karpuri Thakur. He was also one of the dominant thing. And Mandal Commission was appointed. They didn't have any data because, as I told you, 1931 was the last period. You know what they did? They used the 1931 data for 1980. Pro rata, they allocated people. That means if 1931, let us say Yadavs were 8% of UP population, just as an example I am telling. 1980, what is the UP population? And the same 8% taken as Yadavs. So many, reproductive rate and decline or increase in population would have taken place during the whole period. Anyhow, they did this, what I would call idiotic type of a mathematical exercise, and they came out with the conclusion 52% of Indians are other backward caste. Other backward caste means those who are not SC or those who are not STs. Earlier, SCs used to have a reservation of 15%, STs 7.5%. So totally 22.5%. So they told because these people occupy 52%, give them at least 27%, so that the total become 22 plus 29, 49.5, less than 50. They didn't want to. So, and this report was submitted in 1980, and Indira Gandhi just kept it aside. She told this will create social tension and no need to. She was very realistic, perhaps. Anyhow, and but what happened much later when VP Singh became Prime Minister? He introduced this in order to retain his chair. It was a political decision. It has got nothing to do with. And these groups in many states cannot be considered as belonging to backward caste at all. And other backward caste they are called, but many of them are rich, landed gentry actually. Many of them now new groups want to be included into other backward caste. Everybody wants to claim. Jat say we are backward caste, and Bhumihar says we are backward caste. Then what one can call Yadavs, and in the south, the Tevars say they are backward caste. Counters, they are, very many. Former Chief Minister of Madras State, EP, EPS it is called. He is a backward caste. And so all, all these big leaders are all, now Marathas want to be classified as backward caste. Gujarat, Patels all say we are all, everybody is backward in this country, actually, in terms of demand. So there is and so in some states, it is more than 50%. In Tamil Nadu, for instance, the reservation is 69%. 69% in government jobs as well as government educational institutions. And this is allotted among how many? 90% of the Tamil Nadu. 90% of Tamil Nadu population is declared as backward by government, except some Brahmins and some other groups. All others are backward. And that is one of the state where this caste thing has been there for a very long period of time, from 1920 onwards. 1920, this DMK's great grandfather party was there, called Justice Party, and they were the original thing. They were British bootlickers, no doubt about it. Britishers encouraged them actually to be a party. It was originally South Indian Liberal Federation. What has happened is quite a number of these Congress leaders were Brahmins who were opposing British, who were lawyers, and some terrorists were also Brahmins. So British thought how to deal with this situation. One simple thing is to create this group of so-called non-Brahmin and mostly feudal landlords, and then business people, chettiars and various other groups were. You know what they did? Some of you may remember now, 1919, there was this Jallianwala Bagh took place. Huge number of innocent women, children, men were killed by the Britishers. It was one of the worst massacres which has taken place. Unarmed people, they have all assembled there to protest against Rowlatt Act. Very recently, even our Prime Minister inaugurated one of the memorial for it, and that's a separate issue. This Justice Party, which I was mentioning, the leaders, two of them, Dr. Nair and Chetty, they justified this shooting by the British. Can you beat that? They justified, they wrote articles in the England papers. At that time, the Sarojini Naidu was considered as Nightingale of India. She went to UK, and then everywhere she was talking about the horrible massacre. Thousands of innocent people have been killed by the British. And that Dyer was one of the commander. Later, the story goes, you know about it. Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, so many people were later trying to take revenge. And anyhow, the point I want to make is the Justice Party is the only one group which supported the British. And later on, that got transformed itself into what is called Dravida Kazhagam, DK. E.V. Ramasamy Naikar was the leader of that. He was total bootlicker of British. Not only that, he begged Jinnah that make Dravidistan part of your Pakistan. And Jinnah was not very enthusiastic about the whole thing. Already he was to deal with one side is Pakistan, one side is Pakistan, big gap. And then in South he doesn't want to have, he just ignored it. Then what this E.V. Ramasamy Naikar is called Periyar. Better is E.V. Ramasamy Naikar only. Periyar means somebody who is great. No need to use that word. These are all self-proclaimed, there are a lot of fellows who are self-declared doctors. Doctorate, they will put it. And like that, this Periyar is titled self-proclaimed. So, E.V. Ramasamy Naikar, what he did was, he begged the British, you leave India, it doesn't matter, but only in Tamil Nadu you be there. You rule us from Madras as headquarters. He requested them, I'm not joking, he begged them, he wrote letters, and they thought it's not going to be easy, another thing. Already, Sardar Patel was clearly telling the Nizam of Hyderabad what will happen in case he is not interested in joining in India. He told, we will send army and finish you off. So Patel was a extraordinarily strong man. So anyhow, British left. But this E.V. Ramasamy, he declared 15th August 1947 as a mourning day. And he hoisted black flags everywhere, he and his followers. They, solemnized it as mourning day and were weeping. So that is a past history of these fellows actually. And the current one, DMK, has not, denounced it or anything like that. They say we are proud inheritors of that history of this type of a thing. Why British encouraged it? It was very simple. In the northern part of the country, they were having the substantial amount of Hindu-Muslim issues. after Jinnah became popular and other thing. And they thought the more the division between Hindus and Muslims, the more it would be, they will be able to maneuver. In terms of, whenever Hindus talk about some demands, and they will say, no, 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 Muslims are not for that. And, that divide and rule was very well known by the British. So in the South, they did this caste basis. So in terms of, this caste versus that caste, casteless society will be. And plus some of the missionaries also were very active from the East India Company time onward. One of the major, some of the couple of them who, Caldwell was one of them. And then like your Macaulay in the, people talk about Macaulay Putra, but Caldwell Putras also there are enough. So the missionaries' main aim was to convert. So, but they learned the language Tamil, and they slowly wanted to tell that Tamil is totally different than anything else. They created this cleavage. It is not. So, lot of Sanskrit words in Tamil. Originally, Tamil had 60% Sanskrit. So, they purged those words and inserted what you may loosely call quote unquote pure words. Just in Sanskrit, for instance, in Hindi today, a lot of Sanskrit words have been sort of gone, and Urdu words are being used. Aurat, only people say. People are not talking in terms of Srimati or like that. So many type of words have been, and Urdu has become that's partly also contribution of Bollywood and other thing. Anyhow, same way, this missionaries saw to it that many of the words are removed. Interestingly, you should know, in 1920, around that time, three major ideologies took root in India. Communism, this Dravidian ideology, and the ideology of the Hindutva. RSS also was started around that time. Very interestingly, communism is no more in the picture in India today, except in some, what you call, Daba outside Jawaharlal Nehru University, where people sit and discuss about this nationalism and other thing, or in the hostel of JNU, possibly, I do not know, and some pockets in Kerala. That is also very popular. Otherwise, all over the world, including China itself, is not claiming anymore to be a communist country. The only one pending is that North Korea, one fat fellow periodically comes out and says that, raises his hands and threatens the world. Otherwise, communism is not anymore what one can call an ideology, which is same thing has happened to the other ideology in terms of what you may loosely call at the same time, which was planted in India, Dravidian ideology. It's now only in Tamil Nadu, even though it is called Dravidian, which is supposed to be all the 4 states. No, only in Tamil Nadu. The two other states will not even go very near to any of these things. And all the 4 states are with war with each other on water, on land, on so many other things. So there is no concept of and Tamil Nadu alone, it is surviving as of today. And the third is very interestingly this Hindutva, which seems to be actually growing more, particularly after the ascension of BJP into power. Quite a number of places, it is now becoming a very dominant type of a thinking, in terms of Hindu unity. And so this is something, all of them are 100-year-old. 2 of them are gone, only one is surviving. So the caste issue again and again becomes important post independent period. The reason is one man, one vote in democracy. If you are, everybody has got one vote. You can show your finger like that after voting also. So if you if you create or if you consolidate large number of people into one group, then you can try to get their votes. I represent the Yadav interest, for instance. So actually there is nothing called Yadav. There are, I am told, some 45 clans within Yadav. In Tamil Nadu, the Tevar they call it. Tevar, there is no caste actually. There are 66 groups within that, and 3 major groups are there. If you ask somebody which caste you are, he will say Agamudayar or he will say Kallar. Same thing, Jats, you should know there are 400 subdivisions. Everybody is, the Jat is a terminology used by journalists as well as by the contemporary political leaders to impose on the people. If you ask the people, they will say they're sub caste only. That is what they belong to. So there is a very interesting thing. Aggregation is taking place today. Aggregation means what? All the small groups are trying to be consolidated. We are all Jats. That thing is there. We are all Yadavs. And actually, UP Yadav and Bihar Yadav, 100 differences are there. They are not the same Yadav. Spelling may be same, but there is so much amount of differences. And so this aggregation is taking. There is a census done actually in 2011, along with the census, main census, socioeconomic and caste census. That data is there. 250 million households were covered. And of course, that data revealed that there is 172 households, there is one caste. Because people don't identify with the aggregated caste. This is what is very important. For instance, that day we were talking about caste. You may say caste, but within caste there are so many type of. So people may identify with one of those subdivision only. They may not think themselves as a caste itself. So there are, for instance, in the Karnataka, Linkayat is the big caste talked about, and there are Padamsali Linkayat, there are Sadar Linkayat, so many. So when you ask somebody to which caste you belong, he will say Sadar. That's all. He is not going to say anything more or less. So the people's understanding of caste is disaggregated. Political requirement is aggregation. Aggregation is giving you the what you may loosely call the vote bank. For instance, you should remember, in 2019, when the present government came into being, Prime Minister called a meeting of all OBC MPs. Never it has happened in the history of independent India. Only OBC MPs he called, and then he gave a bhashan to them. In other words, it was felt that OBC as a category is a very large chunk of this what you may loosely call the vote bank. And for instance, recently Kalyan Singh was after his death, so much was made out of him because many thought he is a very good representative of the OBC. And within OBC again, there are what are called powerful OBCs and less powerful OBCs. So this whole thing is essentially a vote catching type of a division. For instance, now Mayawati is talking in terms of oppression of this SCs or listed communities or Dalit as they are popularly known as, and Brahmins. This is what she's her slogan is. These are the two communities which are really oppressed. So we have to, you may laugh at it, but that is a, what one can call a politically expedient for her. She thinks that if she keeps these two, then it will go a facilitative. Otherwise, most of the major parties are focused on what you may loosely call the OBCs. And, I call them actually F20. There are 20 families in India which control the political sphere. And starting with the Sheikh Abdullah and his son, Mehbooba and his sister in the north to Karunanidhi and his son Stalin in the south. All. So BJP is different. Other than that, even if you look at it, the first family of Congress is also a family. So I call it as F20. 20 families having grip over the Indian political scene. Mulayam Singh Yadav and his son, then Lalu Yadav and his children, then Devagowda and his children. In all this, I also find something very interesting. The second son is given more important by the father than the first son. If you take Lalu Yadav or if you take Devagowda or Karunanidhi, all the second sons are very active. They become chief ministers or they become powerful. Not the first sons. I don't know. This is, I call it a second son syndrome or Dusra son. That is the most interesting thing actually. One can study that separately. Now this F20, family of 20 political parties, all of them are OBC controlled. You should remember that. Their primary aim is to, sorry to say, make money as much as possible. And among them, the most dangerous casteist party is the DMK. And the DMK is not only just making money, also in terms of talking about separatism, separate Tamil Nadu. After they came to power recently, they are going back to 1957 agenda. 1957 agenda was separatism, actually. In 62, it was given up after the Chinese conflict. There was a provision in the parliament enacted where if you talk about separating country, it can be sedition, it can be put inside. Then Anadure gave, that time chief minister, he gave it up. But now they are trying to go back to 57. So existence of caste per se is not a problem at all. Caste have always existed. Even if you read the book by some of the eminent authors in India, for instance, in so many situations, when you visit for Kumbh Mela, for instance, people don't worry about caste. In the buses or trains or even in the riverside, people are not very particular about caste. Caste is primarily used at the time of shadi, marriage, as well as some of the ceremonies associated with death. So these are, very important thing at that time, at the birth also. But by and large, all the castes have got some commonality across the country. For instance, Mundan, shaving the head of a child, some do after 10 days, some do after 1 year, but everybody undertakes the task of offering the hair to the god. This is, I'm not telling you in one part of the country or anything, everywhere. Similarly, Namagaran, naming the child. Similarly, Annaprasana, at the some age, child is given some solid food to eat. Till then, only milk and other thing. So there are a lot of these which are common actually. So caste is per se is not something to be condemned, or we will create a casteless society and other thing. People are telling for the last maybe 1,000 years. They will continue to try to create it. Nothing wrong about it. But every caste has got its own characteristic, its own specificities. Specificities in terms of food habits, in terms of method of cooking, in terms of method of celebrating festivals, method of welcoming a newborn, method of performing the rites after the death of a person, marriage, like that. So many things. There are special characteristics within a subcaste and a sub-subcaste also. These are traditional. These are coming handed over ages before. There is nothing wrong intrinsically about it or anything. The only thing is, for political purposes, caste conflicts are created. This is what, like Gurjars and this in Rajasthan, there is an agitation by these groups in order to. So they are pitching one to other. The Meenas are pitched against Gurjars. Gurjars are pitched against the other Jats. Like that, it goes on. This is purely, and then reservation has become the clamor. Everybody wants to have. The role of government itself is coming down, and many places government is not able to meet the salary expenses. Forget about other things. So what I worry or I am concerned about is government should not declare this so-called reservation in private sector also. Then in order to collect more votes, that would create a much more social upheaval. So caste have never ever had any conflict among themselves. Let us be very clear. You can't show me some major caste wars between two different major castes in India during the 1,000 years I am talking about. So the caste conflicts are post-independence phenomena in terms of democratic one man, one vote basis. And so let us be very clear about it. Mobilization of caste for vote bank is a very tricky and a risky thing, because every group will try to mobilize it. And when you mobilize caste, obviously people also begin to mobilize on the basis of religion. And Islam is in danger is one of the standard type of a slogan all over the world. And with the arrival of Taliban on our border, one has to be much more cautious. So should we stress on the differences among caste, or should we stress on the commonality between caste? This is the most important thing actually. I think we should more stress on the commonality in terms of common traits and common behavior and other things. It's not intrinsically so. Many of these combination, permutation talked about are not very useful except creating conflict. They talk about MOI, for instance, Muslims and Yadavs. That's supposed to be a very powerful, whatever you call it. Then they say meme and beam. Beam is Ambedkar represent. But these are divisions created for vote bank purposes. Nothing more or nothing less. There is no other, and that obviously creates certain amount of conflict. But what we require to do is caste has to be recognized, it exists, and it is also a huge social capital. If you see, United Nations has identified some 800 and odd economic clusters in the country, different places. If you visit them, you will find most of the economic clusters are caste clusters actually. You go to Coimbatore, you find Gaundars are doing extremely well in textile as well as, or you go to this Shivakasi, Nadars are doing extremely well in firecrackers, and how are they doing well? Over a long period of time, they have built actually networks in terms of lending, borrowing, in terms of market access, in terms of labor availability. All these things, all of them are facilitated with each other based on caste. And I have did the survey. I have written a book also, Caste as Social Capital. And in many of these places, the caste are benefited actually. They say even lending borrowing is easier because there is a caste pressure in order to repay. The NPA is very low. Same thing you go to Morbi in Gujarat. The same thing you go to Surat, where the Patels have done an excellent job in terms of the what you may loosely call the diamond industry. Every cluster, or you go to Ludhiana, Ramgarias and various clusters, caste has played a very positive role. So let us be very clear, caste in business unites, caste in politics divides. So let's keep this distinction in mind before I always say that reservation is only a very small crutch which will help the caste. What will help is business and commerce, where they can have more amount of, in other words, Vaishyavization of India should be done. India should become Vaishyas, everybody, except government, which should be Kshatriya, protecting the interest of the people and other thing. Unfortunately, during the entire Nehru time, government was doing the job of Vaishya in terms of business in hotels, in airlines, and all that thing. And the people were all, not doing any either Vaishya or Kshatriya, nothing. Some places people were taking their Kshatriya role to protect their own locality, women, and other things. That's all. There is no other. So, business unites caste, politics divides. We should be very clear about it. And per se, there is nothing abnormal or nothing to be. It is there in everywhere. It is there in Christianity. It is there in Islam. And do not ever, a man born as a Catholic dies as Catholic only. Sometime he changes the church. That's all. Otherwise, there are some something like 70 and odd major churches in India and all over the world, and they were all that's again, a black church in USA I have visited. The whites normally won't go there. So similarly, whites do not expect the blacks to visit there. So this is everywhere in the world. There is a sort of, call it by different name. You call it by sect, you call it by other type of divisions. There is Shias and Sunnis, and within that Sunnis there is a huge amount of divisions and other things. So, point I want to stress is, per se, there is no need to be ashamed about the caste system or anything. It has been misused. As I told you in the context of Tamil Nadu, DMK, who are the bootlickers of British, and British used it to divide the social system. And it has also been contemporarily being misused by the political parties in order to make their own gain. But it will have its own what one call limitations, I would say. Beyond a point, people will also understand that this caste mobilization is just for getting votes only. Nothing more is going to come out of it, because intrinsically no caste want to be in war with another caste. Let's be very, very clear about it. They are more sensible, and they are much more broad-minded and liberal in the context of economic development and so many other activities taking place. The traditional type of political slogans may not be useful. So what I would like to stress is, we must understand the caste structure. We must appreciate some of the positive aspects of it and other things. We should try to minimize the importance of caste in political mobilization. That is not going to be very useful. And across India, there are huge amount of cultural unity and cultural, what one can call integration, which is there. People from up north, from I've seen from Bhopal, they come all the way to our Rameshwaram and then carry the water from here in order to pour it in Ayodhya. So it's a huge amount of a massive amount of integration is there. We should actually look at it and strengthen it. That is what is the most important thing. Thank you very much for your patient hearing, and I thank Shubham again for providing this good opportunity. And I wish maybe not too late for me. Otherwise, in the rebirth, I should be able to talk to you in fluent Hindi. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for giving your precious